You mentioned that you had a group of people doing research on sort of the history of the Laffer curve and how that's applied. Is it possible to get a hold of that research, beyond?
Yes. These are summary slides. We're going to be putting out as much detail as people want. So a lot of people just want these bite-sized chunks, and they just want to get where you head. Okay, so in our 30-second TV spots, we're going to be, high level and interesting, but high level. And then for those that want to dig in, we're going to have white papers and details. And so, number one, we'll get you those white papers when they're ready. Some of them are ready now, and some of them are ready soon. And the second thing we'll offer all of you, if any of you want to talk to my policy team, it's a super sharp group. I'll be happy to set you up with those folks, and you can go into even more detail. And then in addition to having a great policy team inside my campaign, I travel around the country with my policy team, meeting with folks at AEI, Heritage, who were the other day. So we're tapping in. When I met with Art Laffer myself, we've met with a lot of the experts around the country too to make sure that our ideas and our programs and our forecasts are thoughtful and reasonable and make good economic sense. Because the initial pushback I got from the media was, you're hoping revenues will go up when you cut taxes? How can you afford to take that chance? And so no, I'm not hoping. We've analyzed this, and there's been at least a dozen. We found in the last 15 years there's been at least a dozen major tax cuts by states. Every single time, it produced higher revenue rates than before the tax cuts. Wow. And at the state level, now at the federal level, we know that worked too. President Kennedy, even though he was a Democrat, he understood cutting tax rates produced more federal tax revenue. Of course, President Reagan, was the champion. Don't have to say much there. We know what happened when he cut tax rates significantly. Total tax revenues went up. President Bush, tax revenues were plummeting until he cut the taxes significantly, and then immediately turned around and total tax revenues at the federal level went up after those Bush tax cuts. They were. So we're talking human nature. We're talking providing the right kind of incentives for people. Yes, sir.
Yeah. No need to convince me on lower tax rates to get better revenues in some sense. Okay, that happens in California. What's to stop those additional revenues getting sucked right through the Democratic legislature and put into growing the beast?
And by the way, that does remind me, even if you're not from California, you got to care about what's going on here. We're talking about 12% of the population here, roughly the same percentage of our entire economy. If California continues to tank, it's going to drag the country with it. And so this 2010 governor's race, if I can say so, most important race in the country in 2010. Will be probably the most expensive race in 2010, and will have the most impact, not only on California, but on the whole country. With regards to the legislature, you simply, there just has to be a governor who's willing to use all the power of the governor's office. Now, in California, on paper, the governor has a tremendous amount of power. The line item veto power, which doesn't exist everywhere, the statute veto power, and then appointments power, all those judges. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to use all that power in a concentrated way, in a focused way, to accomplish my jobs package. And I will, the governor is being congratulated right now in some quarters for vetoing 30% of all the bills or something. I'm going to veto all the bills if I have to. And that's why my partnership with the Republicans in the legislature is so essential, because you can overturn a governor's veto, with a 2/3 vote. I plan, unlike the current governor, I plan to partner tightly with my Republican colleagues in the legislature. And that's why my first instinct when I decided to run for governor was, I got to talk to my friends in the legislature. I got to do this as a partnership, because we're going to do this as a team here. 2/3 of the Republicans in the legislature today have endorsed me. 8 past California Republican Party chairs have endorsed. Lots of county party leaders. Things are going really well. I know it's competitive, very competitive. I'm running against some pretty famous people with lots of resources. But I can promise you this, the Republican Party in California, just like the Republican Party in every state, most likely, they're going to nominate a conservative. They just will. They always do. And so I just feel just extremely well positioned here.
Hey, just a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
Obviously, first goal is get us in balance, which would be nice. And I may be dreaming a little bit to looking beyond that. But after that, is it just keep us in balance, or is it start to roll back some of the state spending?
Now, in the next few days, I'm going to be rolling out my tax cut plans. Excuse me, my spending cut plans. So we've rolled out the tax cut plans, which will stimulate the economy. But I really do want to take the size of government down. We can generate a surplus. I want to create a rainy day fund. It's the first thing I want to do with the surplus, because we should have a rainy day fund so that, given the high volatility of revenues, we need a rainy day fund to help deal with some of the ups and downs. Then we need to start paying off some of this massive debt. I can't believe how much debt we've accumulated here. And then finally, give the money back to the taxpayers after that. Now, the tax cuts, let me just give you just a sense of where we're going. I keep saying spending cuts. Let me just give you a sense of where we're going with the spending cut plan, which we haven't really announced to anybody yet, and we'll give you the details soon. But just
Breaking news for the
I can't tell you how convinced I am that it's no big shocker that the way the government spends its money today is incredibly inefficient. No big surprise. And there's been no attempt to blow up boxes and to take brooms out and sweep things away. There's been no attempt, zero. Now, at the Department of Insurance, I inherited this $5 million deficit when I got there, a $200 million budget. It's all special funds. None of it comes from taxpayers. All my budget comes from taxes on insurance agents and insurance brokers and insurance companies. Well, it's a 130-year-old department. No one's ever done a top-down review. And so we found all kinds of things. I mean, no big shock. As you heard me say in the speech, a 15% reduction. So part of our spending cut proposals that will come out soon is that we will do this across every state agency and every state department. There's billions to be saved. But in addition to that, I'm also taking a look at all the other major budget line items. Let's talk about welfare, for example. Now, I'll give you this one data point. We have 12% of the population in California and 30% of the welfare cases. Well, hang on a second. I mean, that's not sustainable. Why do we have such a... how come we have so many people on welfare in California? 3.5% of the population. The national average is 1.3%. So we have 3 times the national average in California. Now, why would that be? Well, because our benefits are rich and we don't enforce the work rules. So I'm going to be rolling out a plan here soon where we're going to cut the benefits because they're way too rich, and we're going to enforce the work rules. And one of my primary goals is to get the welfare rolls in California down to the national average. I mean, that's just as a first step. And we'll save billions by doing that. And so we actually have gone through a variety of major spending programs. And let me just distinguish my approach from maybe some others. I'm not a big fan of getting out an axe and just cutting and slicing. I run a large agency. That just does a lot of damage. If you take an inefficient state agency and just whack off money, you just create disruption. You got to do it differently. And I learned this in Silicon Valley, really, in my companies. You got to do an overview, a top-down review. And this is what I did at the department. You got to look at every program. Some things get eliminated completely. Some things get ramped up.